That phone.
All right. All right. So we are live right now. Peace and blessings, brothers and sisters. I hope all is well. Currently, once again, this is the Cosmocentric Mystic Amaku Ahun. And today, I, this is a special treat. Right now. Peace and blessings, brothers and sisters. Because I do have a guest that has devoted his life, his work, his spirit to the liberation and elevation of people of African descent worldwide. And it's a very special honor and privilege that I have right now to be interviewing Dr. Orwa Hei Ra and Comet, and for him to share some of the work that he's done recently in releasing some information in the form of a book that will assist us as we move forward in the future and look to establish our communities and look to establish leadership in the Black community. So, Dr. Incommon, if you could, I'll just let you introduce yourself to the people or to the brothers and sisters that are watching, and we'll go from there.
Okay, Hetapo, can you hear me well?
It's a bit low, but yes, I can hear you.
Very good. Yeah, I want to thank you first for the opportunity to come and share with your listeners and viewers or whatever. This important work that we embarked on back in 2007, something like that. Was a culmination of several years of practice within the African system, cultivated by the Sarasate Society and Shechem and Shechem Ron Ephraim the first. Back early on in Sarah said, it was decided that if we were going to organize ourselves on a political system, it had to be something which was African and generically, and spoke to the spiritual foundation of our people, culturally, historically, etc. So the decision was made to form an African kingship. And within the kingship system, kingship model, we have a system that's put in place to help elevate the quality of leadership within the community as not something that is stagnant, but was ever evolving and ever developing. As people develop, people move into higher positions of authority, higher positions of responsibility, based on the character of their character and their development. So that's the basis of the work. And so, as around 2000 or so, actually in 1980 something, I decided I wanted to do a PhD. Actually, I wanted to do that in 1970 something. But in 80 something, I made the decision to do a PhD work on the African kingship. And so it took me about 20 years or so to get started. So I started in Ghana, in Kumasi, Ghana, with the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, about 2007, 2008, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Completed the work in 2015, something like that. So about 7 or 8 years of work putting together this thesis, which is entitled Divine Kingship of Asante, a model for sustainable development of self and community.
Okay, awesome. You had said something earlier. How does one develop themselves to become a leadership in what you had said earlier in the start? You said you develop yourself spiritually in order to attain leadership roles?
Yes, well, first of all, you have to understand that each of us comes to earth with a divine mission. If you can see on the scripture behind my head, it says, you know, we're divine beings. What matters most is how we see ourselves. Are you a human or divine being? That's a critical question. And until we can answer that question properly, we can't put anything else in perspective. Meaning that we've seen what human beings can do. Human beings have done some pretty marvelous, wonderful things on earth.
Mm-hmm.
Human beings have done some horrendous things on earth. Because the human being is a model that's fraught with capabilities, but also incapabilities. And it's going to be failures and successes as long as we identify being human. Humans have historically created some of the most horrendous things done on earth. Talk about, excuse me, we talk about in human behavior. Well, in human behavior is really human behavior. The fact that they can take millions of people, subject them to slavery in different lands, etc. That's not inhuman. That's human behavior. Because human beings cannot morally elevate themselves beyond their capabilities. Human being is directly linked to its animal past. See, we have these four brains, as it gets to the heart of the matter. Four brains. We have the reptilian brain, we have the mammalian brain, we have the cerebral cortex, and we have the prefrontal cortex. And each of these brains is tied to a particular epoch of the evolution. The reptilian brain corresponds to the earliest stage of evolution within mammals, within human beings. So when we say reptilian, we're talking about the reptilian brain, which is about 500 million years old. And it's dominant because it's the dominant part of reptiles. But reptiles are very cold blooded, so to speak. They're only interested in self preservation. What can I do to preserve myself and continue to live? So that's a dominant influence within human behavior. We have the mammalian brain. Now, mammalian brain is about 250 million years old. But the mammalian brain is interested primarily in coming together and banding together and working together in social groups, like prides of lions, like packs of hyenas, etc. But these prides and packs are only interested in preserving their group, their particular group. And if you're not part of that group, then you're not a part of their solution system. Then we have the cerebral cortex. Now, cerebral cortex comes into being about 6 million years ago with the evolution of so-called human beings. But cerebral cortex, on 6 million years old, is directly linked with the behaviors and tied into the proclivities and influences of the animal past, of the reptilian brain and the mammalian brain. So even though cerebral cortex can make decisions based on things, its decisions are based primarily on the influences of the animal parts of the brain. So whenever it comes to a crossroads situation, it's going to fall back to that thing which is most important. So it comes down to a situation where it's going to be one human over another. It's going to fall back to that reptilian situation of self-preservation. If it comes down to a situation where it's going to be one group over another, it's going to fall back to the mammalian system of my pack versus your pack.
Hmm.
As long as we're functioning on that level, we can never evolve beyond the segregated behaviors that limit human experience. But fortunately, God put in place a higher part of our brain. And that part of our brain is called prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex, if you read the scientific literature on the subject, it talks about how the prefrontal cortex is a part of the brain which is designed to control the animal influences of the reptilian and mammalian brains. It's part of the brain which is to guide us toward morality and spirituality. Now, so if we're going to become something beyond humans, which are tied into the animal past, we have to link into the prefrontal cortex part of the brain. Now, the part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, though, is is a part of the brain which does not. It's only about 100,000 years old, so it's really a baby. It doesn't have much influence in our behaviors and our lives. So how can we channel our influence, change our influential behaviors? We have to cultivate, to nourish this part of the brain. But the nourishment, it cannot be done on its own, meaning that you can't learn this thing on your own. You can't learn it as a part of a typical human system or a million pack or reptilian self-preservation mode. It has to be something which is cultivated and developed by someone who can guide you to a higher level. And this is why our ancient ancestors in Kemet, they talk about the prefrontal cortex, they called it the kente. And the kente, they said, was right in the center of the forehead, right here, which is called the so-called third eye, etc. The ajna faculty and the
How do you spell that?
kente, Kenti.
Hmm. Okay.
And it's also called, it has a number of appellations, but one of the highest appellations is called the Holy of Holies, or the seat of Osir. Now, what is Osir? Osir is the model, the ideal that in ancient Kemet was the person who awakened the divine potential within them. How do I awaken the divine potential within me? By overcoming the influences of the animal, the reptilian mammalian, and the cerebral cortex influences of the brain. By nourishing the cerebral cortex. Now, how do I nourish the cerebral cortex? Prefrontal cortex, sorry. Prefrontal cortex is nourished through meditations and spiritual work designed to awaken it, to strengthen it, to feed blood to it, to strengthen it so it can control, it can exert its controlling influence over the lower parts of the brain. Now, so the kente was a part of the brain, a part of the spirit, part of the prefrontal cortex, the link, prefrontal cortex, our ancestors in ancient Kemet, linked to understanding that if I'm going to evolve beyond the limitations of humanity, I have to tie into the divine potential within me, which is seated in what we call ser, which is resident within the kente, or the prefrontal cortex area. So to do that, we have to awaken with the nourishment. We have to feed it energy. But if my energy is constantly being drained off in the lower parts of being, drained off in my self-preservation activities, drained off in my group activities, drained off in my ideas about what I want to do to be successful in life, which is what the cerebral cortex offers. There's very little energy left to develop the prefrontal cortex. So the spiritual process that we're talking about in terms of cultivating, awakening, and elevating our persons has to do with being guided to the point where we're no longer influenced and controlled by the lower parts of the brain. We nourish and feed the higher parts of the brain so that part of the brain can now guide us toward awakening the divinity within me. And that divinity within me is the key to commitment to awakening the divinity within me, is the key to moving forward and evolving humanity beyond where it is into divine parts of being. Evolution is not over. We talk about people talk about evolution as something that's in the past. No, humans are still evolving. What are we evolving towards? We're evolving towards the divinity within us. We can't. It's not something that's going to happen automatically. It's something that we have to cultivate and guide ourselves toward doing by having spiritual models that guide us and awaken us that part of our brains.
So, how does this relate? How does this conversation relate to the Asante system of divine kingship? Is this something? I mean, of course, now I'm kind of couching this conversation like I don't know, but I suspect that within the Asante model of divine kingship, they have these systems of cultivation, whereas you cultivate your person or your spirit to a level and degree where you have control over those urges within yourself that have more selfish tendencies. Is that
Yeah.
what is that a part of it, or is it just in name only?
No, no, no. The same kind of parallels that we draw with ancient Kemet, we draw with the Santi model, in that the Kente, which is a part of the spirit of awakening, part of the being, which enables us to control the lower aspects of being, which is centered right in the center of the forehead, is what's called the Kra in the Akan culture. And the Kra is a part of the spirit through which God has a seat within man's being. So just as Kente, which is the seat of Osir, which is God manifesting through man, is within the Kemetic system, the Kra is where uh, Nyame manifests through man within the Khan system. And so the concept of Amen being the highest principle within the Assyrian system or the Kemetic system, that which says that my essence of my spirit is one of peace. And as long as I focus on peace as the essence of my being, then everything else can be manifested through the understanding of peace, what peace is. Well, within the Akan system, we have the concept of Vinyame. And Vinyame is a term for a supreme being. But Vinyame literally means one who's satisfied, to be satisfied. If one is satisfied, one's at peace. So you see the direct correspondence. But the understanding that within the Khan system is that the uh, the heart has to be satisfied, has to be at peace in order for the Kra to take control of the spirit. The same principles,
Heart has to be satisfied.
the heart has to be satisfied within it, be at peace and for the Kra to guide man. Same thing within the Kemetic system. The Eb, which is termed for the heart, has to be at peace that's satisfied for Kente to be awakened so the Osir can guide man in its development. Same principles at work. So in ancient traditions, though, before a person be put in a leadership position, they have to demonstrate that they have a commitment to awakening, to stilling the heart, to bringing the heart to peace, so they can manifest the divinity within them, so that they can guide the people. Because leadership can't be based on emotional responses, which is tied into the animal parts of the brain. Can't be based on personal and sensual responses, which is tied into the animal parts of the brain. Can't be based on self-preservation responses. Leadership is responsible. Leaders are responsible for everybody and everything within the environment. So you can't have a particular clique, a particular pride, or a particular pack that you're tied into. You have to be elevate your mindset above and beyond those. But the cerebral cortex, a part of the brain which makes decisions within man, does not know the difference between right and wrong. Otherwise, we would have all the right decisions made. Understand that the horrendous behaviors of man, enslavement of African peoples, extinction of Native Americans, etc., all these were done by educated people. These weren't people of of low intelligence. These are some of the most educated people in the world. People had degrees from Oxford and Cambridge, etc. People that had degrees from these higher education institutions who did these horrendous things, which means that intelligence cannot guide us. Intelligence can we can use intelligence to make decisions, but this decision making has to be tied to the higher parts of the spirit, higher parts of being, which is why in ancient Kemet, the term for the wisdom faculty of, of man was Tuti. And Tuti had this pet that was a combination of a crocodile and a beast, right?
Isn't
He
it
kept on
Amit?
this leash. Yeah, he kept on this leash.
Yeah.
And symbolism there is to say that intellect must be covered, guided by wisdom. Otherwise, intellect will cause problems in the world, which is what we have. So we have humans who are letting their intellect make decisions, and the intellect does no difference between right and wrong. Ergo, we have the problems we have today. The world's on the brink of extinction from human behaviors, be it climate change or global warming or whatever term you want to use, be it social problems, whatever is going on. It's based on human behaviors, human decisions. The highest intellects, the highest intellectual beings on the earth are making these bad decisions. They're promoting genocidal and extinction qualities to mankind. So we have to bring some higher level of understanding. We have to bring wisdom into the faculty, bring wisdom into the equation. We have to bring the understanding that God, only God knows. Jinyame, only God knows. So the only way to tap into God is to awaken these divine parts of our being. The prefrontal cortex must be nourished, must be strengthened, so it can guide man to awakening and developing the higher parts of being so we can move forward and save the planet, save the world, and elevate humanity to where we should be.
So this is a question that kind of evolved just now out of this conversation in relationship to philosophy. So in the ancient Kemetic scene of weighing of the soul, the weighing of the heart, the ab, within man, if your heart is heavier than a feather, then it is your soul or your heart is given to Amit in order to be devoured and to go back into creation, so to speak, or go back into an existence in which you experience whatever you experience. But most people interpret that as being an afterlife state. But from our conversation here, it would also seem that those desires, if they're in your heart now, still you are allowing yourself to be consumed in your material existence by those desires, and is stopping yourself from experiencing a divine existence if you are still going towards those urges stemming from the reptilian and mammalian brain. So it's not like the judgment scene is an afterlife scene. It's also a continuous during life situation as well. That's kind of what I'm getting from this conversation. Is that
Very much so. The fact that everyone's listening to us right now can probably attest to this fact. At some point in their life, they did something that was so wrong. They understood it was so wrong that they felt this heaviness in the heart. Heaviness right there in the center of the chest. That was that animal eating the heart. It's not something that takes place at death. Something takes place every time we make a decision in our lives. Every time we make a decision, if it's a right decision, if it's based on righteousness, it's based on following and living the laws of my heart, or it's based on living according to set, that decision, that weighing the heart scene is played out in our lives. And the only way we can evolve beyond that is when our spirit, when we make a decision based on what we know is correct, anytime and every time we come and make that decision. Because every time I make that decision, it's fueling the energy of the kente part of the brain. It's fueling the energy of the prefrontal cortex. It's awakening Osir within us. See, Osir is a metaphor for human evolution and divinity. But the human evolution and divinity is done so through the son Osir. Son of Osir, which is Heru, who came to restore his father's kingdom to the world, righteousness to the world. And the restoration of righteousness, Heru is able to restore based on his ability to see what is correct, as opposed to feeling what he wants to do. And so Set is a symbol of evil or incorrect behavior, unrighteousness in the world, is there as the model for what we have to do every time we come in touch with a judgment scene situation. Every time we have to make a choice. Every time we have to make a choice in our lives to make a choice between right and wrong, we're at that scene. When we successfully make that scene, then their rules is strengthened, Kente is strengthened, the prefrontal cortex is strengthened, and Osira is awakened within us. Every time we fail at that scene, Set still controls, darkness consumes us, and Osir remains asleep and dormant. So it's not something to become an Osir. It's something that we do through our living experience of awakening the divinity within us by making the right choices in life. How do we know what's right? Has to be tied in with wisdom, faculty, or tahuti. So we have to learn how to consult and go to God to find out what's the right thing to do. And this is where and why the African system is so important to our development. Because in every African system that's of the salt, every traditional African system, there's a system in place for the leaders to consult God to find out what's the right thing to do, what's the proper thing to do. And these systems, these oracle systems, these divination systems, are there to guide the leadership to make sure that what we're finding is divine will. But the ancestors are put in place. Our ancestors put in place these systems to help guide us into our future present, into our future past, from our future past. So if as long as until we get to the point where we're making decisions based on what we know is correct, not what I think is correct, not what I feel is correct, when I go to consult with God and I get clear understanding of what is correct, once that point that way is awakened within me, once Tuesday is communicating to me, once Osiris is awakened by these faculties within me, then we can transform our world or transform our lives. And so the Assyrian model, the Khan model, the Yoruba model, many of the traditional models around Africa are all predicated on the fact that leadership must tie in with the ancestral past, consult with previous leaders, but also with God directly, because only God knows. And as long as I'm following what God to tell me to do, I'm successful. When I go with my head, when I go with what I think is right, I'm gonna make errors. So we got to, as African people, we have to get back to understanding and practicing our traditional culture, which is just not speaking the language, just not wearing the clothes, just not learning the dances. It's about getting the philosophical mindset to understand if if the con statement Jinyame is true, only God knows. How do I find out from God what He knows? And the answer to that question is I have to consult with God to get the guidance. And that's what is traditionally built into leadership models in traditional Africa.
How in the Akan system, how is it that character is developed to this state? How is the divine kingship model done in the Akan system?
Well, it's done through social structure and institutions. we are a product of our society. We all are a product of our society. Find someone who is ingrained in drinking alcohol and smoking weed and all those things. They learned that within the social context of their upbringing. So whatever the society promotes as the ideals is what children are going to learn, because children learn from the social interactions. So within the con system, they have these systems in place to help guide the children to understanding that there's a higher morality, higher spirituality that they have to attain to and cultivate. For example, I talked about the leadership model within a con culture. Well, within in traditional systems, ancient times, and ancient could be 100 years ago, the way things are developing. The children were learned how to function within the social interaction. So they were given roles to play. For example, one child may be given the role of the king, another child may be given the role of the queen mother, another child may be given the role of the priest, another child may be given the role of the head of the obusu pani, head of the family. So they're given these different roles, and they had through role playing, they learn how to function socially in the interaction within society. They understand how a functional social structure is modeled and executed by practice. You can't learn something if you don't practice it. There's a saying that the 10,000 hours of
Yeah,
effort.
that's an acupuncture.
Yeah,
Yeah. Ten
but
thousand hours, 1,000 hours to learn, 10,000 hours to master.
yeah. So if you don't have those 10,000 hours of mastery of the right kind of things, everybody's putting the 10,000 hours into something.
Mm-hmm.
But what are you putting the 10,000 hours into? Is it into developing and modifying a spiritual model that will help guide the society toward a better understanding? Or is it toward how can I take advantage of situations? How can I leverage my position to benefit my person or benefit my clan or benefit my social group? Versus how can I leverage my position to benefit the whole and evolve the whole of mankind?
This activity that the children engage in, is this a current model that they use as well? Do they still do this?
Unfortunately, no. But there are there are things built in the culture like proverbs, etc., that are there to guide the thinking of individuals. But more unfortunately, more often than not, because of Western influences, people are now falling prey to the Western models of leadership and education. And hence, there's a problem that is coming up. They're experiencing the same kind of problems that we experience in the West as it relates to social evolution, social involvement, political evolution, political involvement, and cultivating the right mindset for leadership and development of society. But there's a renaissance trying to going on in Africa. There
Mm.
are many people who see the failure of adopting the Western models and are going back and trying to Sankofa bring back the traditional teachings, bring back the traditional ideals, bring back traditional philosophies, so they can begin to reconstruct society because they've seen how far society's gone downward as a part of the Western culture model that they've been following for the last 50 years.
In your book, you give several diagrams that at least one has come to mind now in reference to this conversation. You were saying how many people, I think it was the early 1900s, how many people were Christian when in the early 1900s when they first started doing a census, and then I think the number was somewhere in the 90s, 90% or something of that nature, and then you did you referenced another census done I think in the 1990s or in the early 2000s, and it was a significantly different number. So is there a direct correlation between the adoption, I think you said this already, but I wanted to just bring this up, a direct correlation between the adoption of Western values and the devolution of social structure?
Oh yeah, very much so. The what you were alluding to was the census that was, well, it wasn't a census in 1900s. It was like early 1900s. It was actually just there was prior to census taking. If you ask people in the street, virtually 100% would have been practitioners of Akan culture, practitioners of Akan spirituality. In 1960, when the first census was taken, the new government of Ghana, the, the numbers were something like 40 some percent considered Christian, for 30 some percent Muslim, etc. 20 some percent traditional practitioners. 19 2010, the number has switched to like 3% or so would say they're practitioners of traditional and African values, about, and the rest of them are practitioners of Western values, Christianity and the like, which says that there's a direct correlation between the devolution, as you say, of social structure, social society, social well-being, and the devolution of spiritual contact with African traditional values. There's a direct correspondence and direct correlation. And the only way to turn that around is to go back into the traditional practices. And so that's what I wrote this text was. The purpose of the text is to serve as a model to show people that, yeah, where we are is not where we should be. Where we are is not where we were, spiritually speaking, but we can turn the system around simply by readopting the models of our ancestors that have been practiced for thousands of years prior to Western man's influence. When we figure out the divine kingship model is the oldest historical political system on earth. As soon as history starts being written, we find that divine kingship is in place. Then we understand it's something that our ancestors have practiced for thousands of years. And as we moved away from that system, so too we moved away from understanding that as a whole, society, the leadership has to be responsible for the whole of society, the whole of the environment, and everything must work together. And unfortunately, when we live in a society today where political leadership is only interested in its own particular self-aggrandizement, its own particular promoting itself above and beyond everything else, and to the detriment of everything else. There are people right now who, because of their political affiliation, are making millions of dollars at the same time they're destroying the environmental integrity of Earth. Now they're going to have to suffer. Their grandchildren have to suffer just like all the rest of us. But they don't care about that. All they care about is getting the most of what they can get right now. It's that survival, that reptilian brain, survival of the fittest type thing. The snake is only interested in protecting itself. And that's where they are. And unfortunately, that's where the world is being guided by. If we're going to turn the world around, we have to turn around the model of spiritual leadership or leadership in general, and spiritual leadership specifically. Understand that spiritual leadership is just not saying that I'm in touch with God. We have to have an objective tool that we can use to communicate with God, so we all understand that communication is taking place. Now, preacher man, I remember back in back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, it's probably in the 80s, 90s, something like that. There was an old preacher called Oral Roberts, and yeah, my grandma used to send her pennies to his cat years ago, back in the 50s. And Oral Roberts had a vision. I forget what the vision was, but that vision, in essence, said he needed X amount of dollars to build whatever it was he wanted to build. Now he said God told him to do this. And people like my grandmother, she was passed by this time, but people like her would send in this money. Now, okay, maybe he did. I don't know. All we have on his is his word that God spoke to him, and it's what God said. But God spoke to a lot of people. God spoke to Jim Jones. You know Jim Jones, right?
Yep. The Kool-Aid brother.
Yeah, the Kool-Aid brother. God spoke to him. God's spoken to a lot of folks and done some horrendous things to people. So we need something else, something other than man saying God spoke to me. We need to lay it on the table. Show me what God said in an objective fashion. Show me, take me to the consult that you did with God. Show me the coins, the cards, the cowrie shells, so I can understand what God said myself. And that's how traditional Africans work. in Yoruba culture, the Ifa, the Yoruba divination system of Ifa, or the Ifa culture that functions throughout Western Africa. If the priest did a reading, he said, "This is what I got." Everyone who has knowledge of that system could verify that this is what we have, which is why you have systems where in place where we don't have to worry about whether God spoke, because we understand that God speaks to man through these systems, and then we can verify what God said to us through these systems. So if God said, "Send me money to build this whatever," I can show you the consult that was done, and you can then evaluate it on your own and make your decision to support or not support. And that's what we got to get back to as a people. And until we get back there as a people, we are going to be left to the possibility of emotional tyranny, intellectual tyranny. People are very gifted with gab. People are very gifted with intellectual manipulation. People are very gifted with emotional manipulation. Will be able to manipulate people to make decisions and do things which may or may not be the right thing for us to do.
This is one of the reasons why I wanted to engage in these conversations with various leaders in our community, is because currently we have that element in our community. People with the gift of gab, misleading misleading at the very least thousands, up to hundreds of thousands of people, with their ability to influence and charismatically talk to people and get them to go a certain way. People have been taken advantage of, so on and so forth. You definitely have certain people out here nowadays who profess to be a certain way, lead people down a certain road, and take them through various abuses. All of this is being able to be seen online. Um, and so this is why that one of the reasons why I wanted to engage in these discussions and these conversations, to show that there are models of leadership which are very functional. Um, one of the questions that comes to mind is when you see, just thinking of the general average African in the diaspora, how is equality and ability, how is equality addressed, and how is ability recognized in a kingship, divine kingship system? How can we ensure justice is served, and also how can we ensure that people's talents are recognized and respected, and so on and so forth? How can one be recognized in such a system? Because when you say kingship and tyranny are tied together in the Western mind. And kingship, tyranny, and dictatorship.
And
So how are those elements taken care of?
you also include presidents in that tie, presidents and ministers.
Yes.
Yeah. Same model, same Western mind, same human context. Anytime humans touch anything, it goes down. So humans came into Africa, learned, saw a kingship model, tried to emulate a kingship model, and changed it into their image. You know, they say man makes God in his own image.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the fact. Man makes kingship in his own image. Western man has made kingship in his own image. Whereas the African man made kingship in the image of divinity, the Western man has made kingship in the image of humanity. And the only way that tyranny can exist in any system, be it presidential, be it political, be it governmental, be it social, be it communistic, democratic, whatever, is because of the quality of the leadership in that system. And the fact that people have no way of verifying and validifying what's being done and said by leaders in their name. Which is why we gotta go back to excuse me. Which is why we have to go back to the oracle system. In our society, for example, society, everyone is taught how to learn and use the oracle, how to consult with God directly. Every person is taught to consult with God. So if I come to you and say, God said this, you can open your book and you can match what I said with God, what's in the book. So there's no guessing. I'm not gonna manipulate. I'm not gonna change nothing. If a person is showing that initiative. Person shows quality, shows character, and they're out here working hard in the community. Then we go to God to say, this person is showing that they're committed to what we're doing on a certain level. Should they be promoted to a position of authority and responsibility? And God will say yes or no, because only God knows. I can't look into your spirit. I can see what you're doing, but I can't look into your spirit and tell what you're doing if it's right. There are people who infiltrate situations based on following particular models of behavior. We know the models vary. COINTELPRO, the Panthers, etc. Cats came in, there was more Panthers than human beings, right? And so they were given positions of authority and responsibility. All the while working for the U.S. government. Had the Panthers had an oracle system, they would have gone to the oracle and understood that something's up, something not right. This cat,
Right.
yeah, he's working some subterfuge going on here. All this stuff God can show us. Our ancestors put these things in place to protect us from these kinds of situations. Tyranny is the result of humanity. Humans are tyrannical beings. God is not tyrannical. God is righteous. So if I'm going to function with you in a righteous manner, God will have to sign off on that righteousness. God will have to look at my behavior, but also look into my spirit and say, yeah, he may make mistakes. He may not do everything correctly, but his heart's in the right place, so to speak. So his heart is being fed properly. And so this awakening is linked in with the Kente part of the spirit, so that the two are vibrating properly. And if these two are vibrating properly in sync, then it will allow God to manifest itself and manifest the peace of God through my being. So it's all scientifically based on understanding that where we're going evolutionary, we can take us there. But only we can take us there if we have a leader or spiritual systems in place to guide us to that point. And the Western model cannot take us there. The Western model is predicated on human manipulation, human expression, human conniving, human evaluation, human emotionality, human rationality, human irrationality. All these are human faculties. None of them can awaken the divinity within us. We're divine beings by nature. We need a system that will awaken the divinity within us to allow it to grow and develop so we can go beyond the human and allow God to lead us.
For the average person that sees this and looks at it and gets inspired by this conversation, what are some practical steps that they could take to move forward or to move towards um, manifesting their divine essence within?
Well, there's a number of things. One, they need to learn how to go to God, to consult the oracle. There's two oracle systems that we use pretty much exclusively within our society. The Medunitary system, which is based on ancient Kemetic system, and the Ujing system. So we suggest that those two things are done. They learn how to use them. Learn how to use them and consult, and then find someone who's competent to guide them in understanding what's being said to them. Now, we have some almost 50 years of experience with these systems. With the Yi Jing system, we've been working with this system since 1973. We've been doing their system since 1985, 83, something like that. So we have years of working with these systems, and Shekhar Ron from the first has written books to elucidate these systems and clarify them and break them down so that the common man, every person can grasp the system, understand how it works, and learn how to use it effectively. But you still need a guide, you still need counsel. So that's my suggestion is that you find someone who has the pedigree within the system to work within the system. And we'll work with anyone in this process. They don't have to become a member of our group. We'll work with anyone to teach them, to guide them in this process. That's the first thing. Second thing, in order to become awakened the spiritual process within, you have to be guided by God, which is what the oracle system will provide. But you also have to awaken and cultivate the spirit, spiritual energy. You have to be able to manipulate and challenge spiritual energy. We all have this energy that rolls within us. And this energy is what fuels our energy, feeds our energy, and fuels our the development and activities in life. Everything that we do in life is based on energy. Energy is the basis of all experience in the world. So the question is, how am I going to use my energy? What's guiding my energy? If my energy is wrapped up in the lower parts of the brain functioning, if my energy is wrapped up in looking out for self-preservation, if my energy is wrapped up in how can I control my group or manipulate my group or move my group over other groups, if my energy is wrapped up in how can I use my intellectual power or emotional credibility to get one up on someone else, if that's what my energy is wrapped up in, that's what I'm gonna do. So in order for me to change the model, I have to change the model. I have to be able to self-guide that energy, re-guide that energy. And that's done through meditation. That's done through spiritual awakening, which is done through meditation practices. And the meditation practices are designed to channel the energy to the higher parts of our being, take it out of the lower parts of our spirit into the higher parts of the spirit, where we can purify the energy and then awaken the spiritual faculty within us, awaken the kinti within us, awaken the ajna faculty within us. And by doing that, that will allow God to automatically begin to feed itself through us and communicate through us into the world. So if we're going to become divine beings, we become vessels through which God can through itself, feed itself. But we have to so-called purify our spirit in order to do that, make that happen. So the purification is done through spiritual work, through increased energy, through different spiritual practices like qigong, yoga, etc. Raising energy, then purifying the energy through meditation and spiritual practices, through ritual, help guide the energy to the higher parts of our spirit, so that energy can fuel the higher parts of our being, where God can now use us as a vehicle through which express itself in the world.
Got you. So what about let's just say, how would someone contact somebody? Where would they go? Because generally it's not, this is, well, first of all, this is the internet age, and so contact is, it's not so hard. Back in the day, you had to literally find somebody or walk around and go into a bookstore and hope somebody is there and just allow your spirit to lead you. It's similar today. It's just a little bit more. We just have more connectivity. And so, where would someone go uh, in order to find or get guidance in this way?
Well, if they Google Ser Osset Society, AUSARAUSET Society, they'll get a number of hits from a number of places. Because we operate all over the world. We operate here in the United States, in a number of places. We operate in Canada. We operate in the West Indies. We operate in UK. We operate in Ghana. We operate in South Africa. So we have functional groups operating in all over the world, in the United States, etc. And so they can link in with those groups wherever they are. If not, there's contact information there which they can link into different parts of the world, different parts of society, and different parts of the group. And by so doing, they can then tap into our online classes, tap into our bookstores, tap into our uh, communication expressions, our programs, etc., where they can get more insight into this way of life. They can buy the books. They can buy my book, Divine Kingship, which will give them some insights into correspondence between the traditional African system and the Assyrian system, and how these systems are going parallel to one another. They can buy the Terra system, volumes 1 through 7, which give information to spiritual cultivation, spiritual awakening. How do I use the word of God to become a divine being, and other practices? And everything's there, everything's open, everything's free, everything's open to the public with an option of helping individuals to make the decision on their own. If they want to change something in their life, there's a model here for how you can make the changes. To piggyback on the great philosopher Michael Jackson, we all have to look in the mirror.
Huh.
And we have to look in the mirror and tell the cat we're looking at to change his ways. If we're going to change the world, we have to change what we're doing. But the only way we can change what we're doing is by looking into that mirror that's behind me. If
Mm.
I look into the mirror and I see a human being, then the world's not going to change. If I can look into the mirror and see a divine being and begin to understand what it means to become a divine being, begin to apply and understand what our ancestors meant when they said, know thyself. When they carved that statement in stone thousands of years ago, they had a particular understanding that for mankind to move forward, for humanity to move forward into divinity, for us to evolve beyond where we are today into where we would need to be, we have to understand, know thyself, and understand that there's a process that we have to go through in order to awaken the knowledge of self. And the knowledge of self will then guide us to understand that we have to function on a higher level because we're higher beings. We're not human beings. We're not animals, intellectual animals. We're divine beings who might be functioning in a human way right now, but it's not the end of our evolutionary opportunity or development or goal. Our goal, the goal of evolution ultimately, is to become God men and God women on earth.
Understand.
It's no different than what the sage of the New Testament said when the apostle was tripping out because the man was working on kind of juju and working miracles. He said, "Don't trip on this, but you can do this and greater things."
Yeah.
That's what it's about. So how do I become the Jesus? How do I become the greater Jesus? How do I become the Christ? How do I become the Osir? It's all right there in the ancient temples, the ancient scriptures, ancient practices. If we're gonna move forward, we have to go back. If Sankofa, go back and get that which is in essence, the essence of our being, which is our divinity, and begin to apply that divinity in our lives today.
So we have a guest on, Mrs. Amen. Would you like to say something? Your mic is muted.
Yes, I would. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I just wondered if you could speak to how this awakening this divinity, how much honoring life plays into our obligation or our as people that are trying to awaken the divinity and within in the human form, how much honoring life, and not just human life, but life in general, plays into reaching that level of divinity that we are aspiring to become one with.
Well, life is the gift of God. So everything that God created is created for God's own purpose. And God's own purpose, which is something we need to clarify here, is that prior to manifestation and creation, God existed. But God existed in a state which did not allow for it to experience its true potential, its true actualization. For example, we say that God is omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent. But omniscient means to be all knowing. And to be all knowing means to know all things. But prior to manifestation, there was nothing to know. There was just the potential of knowing. So God created the world, the universe, whatever term you want to use, in order to dwell within the world and the universe through and as all things in order to know its true potential. To become an omniscient, God created all things possible, and through experiencing in life, through these things, it hence knows these things. Which means that everything is here to serve as a vehicle to which God expresses itself, to which God manifests its infinite potential, where God manifests its omniscience, through which God manifests its omnipotence, through which God manifests its omniscience. To be omnipotent means to be everywhere at the same time. Prior to manifestation, there's no place to be. Prior to God creating the world, the universe, whatever, there is no place to be. So how could God be omniscient and omnipotent and omnipresent? So to manifest his omnipresence, God created all places possible, both mental and physical, and dwells in those places in order to realize its omnipotence, in order to realize its omniscience, or to realize its omnipresence. To be omnipresent means to be everywhere. You can't be someplace and not be every place if you're omnipresent. So if the universe, the world, whatever you want to term, is here to serve as the vehicle through which God expresses himself, through which God manifests his true, his essence of his being, and man is to serve as the vehicle through which God is to experience his experiences on the earth. Because man is the only created form which does not have a limitation of its spirituality, of its spiritual organization, spiritual structure. Everything else is limited in its by its spiritual organization to manifesting on its particular level. Lions are going to be lions. A lion is not going to choose to be a vegetarian. It's not in his nature. Rabbits are going to be rabbits. A rabbit's not going to choose to eat meat. It's not in his nature. Man chooses what he eats because man has free will. And God gave man free will because free will is the only way that you can choose to be a divine being. I can't force you to be divine, and you have a free will. If we're going to be divine beings, because God's not a puppeteer. God's not in the sky or anyplace else pulling strings saying do the right thing. God's a playwright. God creates a script, creates scenarios, and puts us in these scenarios. And then we have to take our guidance, our spiritual into the intelligence, spiritual understanding, and make decisions based on the script that we've been given. And if the script says that everything in the earth is interrelated and intertied together, which is what the 11 laws of Ma'at tells us, then a true leader understands that I have to function in the world with this understanding that everything is interdependent, interrelated. And if I violate any one thing, I upset the whole apple cart, so to speak. So if I violate nature, I violate my space. I violate myself. I violate the essence of my being because nature is a part of me. And so the fact that humanity is destroying the earth, is destroying the environment, is destroying the essence of what God created, shows that man cannot lead us out of this experience. Man cannot lead us out of the problems that we have. Man cannot change his nature. He has the only way to change the nature is to exercise free will. And free will says, I only do the right thing. And doing the right thing is what God guides me to do. And the only way I know what's right is to go to God through these divination systems that God gave me in order to determine what's right. So it goes back to consulting God to find out what's right. And if I'm going to change the environment, I have to consult God to find out what I need to do to change the environment. And by so doing, we can turn this thing around. But don't expect that these people who are raping the environment are going to be able to do that. They're not going to come awake, come alive and say, oh, I'm cutting off the hand that feeds me. Because they do it all the time. It's their nature. It's what an animal will do. If an animal's trapped, it's going to cut off this limb, the thing that it uses to feed itself. It's going to cut it off for self-survival. That's not divinity. That's the human expression.
Oh, Dr. Amen. Do you have another question, Ms. Amen?
Yeah, so just clarification. So if it's not, are you saying that nature, human nature essentially is more like animal nature? Because unless you over overcome that human nature, you're acting essentially like an animal or closer to an animal that
Look at it this way. As I said earlier, the animal parts of the brain, the reptilian part of the brain is 500 million years old. The mammalian part of the brain is 250 million years old. The human part of the brain is 6 million years old. Now, in terms of influence and weight and decision making, which do you think is going to be the strongest? The animal. Scientists say that 95% of all decisions that humans make are made based on the influence of the reptilian parts of the brain, the animal parts of the brain. So, in essence, like they will tell us, humans are nothing but animals with intelligence, so-called intelligence. That's as high as humans gonna go. Humans cannot know, they can make decisions, but they don't know what the decision is right or wrong. And there's so many decisions that humans have made that are wrong that we can't, I mean, we can just be here all day discussing. At one point, humans told us it was all right to smoke. Smoking was harmless. At one point, humans told us that asbestos was good for the environment.
Yeah.
At one point, humans told us that thalidomide was a good drug, along with all the other good drugs they've done. Time has shown that humans don't know what the hell they're talking about. So if we're going to change the world, we have to change the paradigm. We have to stop letting the human make decisions and go to God, let God make decisions and guide us. Simple as that.
So did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Of course, it did. So I just, based off of this understanding, it would seem that if, like, for instance, well, I just want to talk about like the science behind, I teach children, and we, when trying to get children to understand how to manage their emotions, we talk about the parts of the brain and how the fight or flight, how when you become angry, your brain literally shuts down and it switches to that survival mode, which is, save yourself. And it affects us all in different ways. And even with people that are sick and the cortisol that they have from the stress of what's going on in the world. I'm saying all this to say that, how is it possible that the all of the decisions or the negative decisions that people are making are when they are based off of, let's say, fear, for instance. Even all of the intellectual debates, the way that people decide to make a choice, even if it is take a life, from the standpoint of like abortion, for instance, you have the fear that you won't be able to take care of the child, that the child won't have the best life, that the child won't have a father. And then society impressing upon you, you won't be able to ever build your resources enough to start a family if you start too young having this child. All of that, all of those reasons that you intellectually, you may not be extremely angry, but you are worried, you are fearful of a negative output coming from this decision that you're making. And so then you choose to abort the fetus. So what I'm saying is that it seems like, and even all of the intellectual debates about why something should be done and why something shouldn't be done, usually there's something motivating behind it, whether it be fear or, to me, in the instances of the drugs that you mentioned that seem to be good, many of the times, most of the times, anything that was pushed was based off of greed, somebody trying to make money off of the population. But so I guess what I'm saying is, are there times when you're thinking in your right mind and it's not motivated by fear or anger or any of these other things, that you are thinking, you are able to just intuit or think clearly about whatever decision you're making, if it's not motivated by I'm worried about something, or and without always relying on a divination system.
Yeah, it's possible you can put 3 bullets in the chamber of a gun, spin the chamber, and you'll shoot yourself in the head. Or maybe not. Why would I risk that if I can know whether my thought is properly correct in the situation? It's not whether or not I should have the child, it's not, my decisions shouldn't be based on circumstances and what people say, whatever. It should be based on God's input. Only God knows. So if I don't go to God, how am I going to know whether my decision is right or wrong? Or I can just load the chamber with 3 guns, 3 bullets, spin the chamber, and just start pulling the trigger. Sometimes I'm gonna get it right, sometimes I'm gonna get it wrong.
Are the divination systems also, aren't the divination systems also able to help to reach clarity about situations? Because the reason I'm asking, I know people that have literally lost their quote unquote religion based off of, let's say they were Christian and they lived their whole life, you know, Jesus loves me, and therefore, I am favored, blessed and highly favored, and therefore nothing sad will happen to me. And then I've seen, something devastating happen to them, and then them question it just flipped their whole belief about why would Jesus or why would God do this to me? And then all of a sudden they're no longer, devout, or they just, they feel like, well, why, So I'm saying this to say, when people come into losing a family member or losing or some great loss, are the divination systems able to provide understanding for them and to to strengthen their divination, their internal divination, with their, with themselves, with their divine self?
Well, again, we have to first understand what so-called loss within me. We come to earth to become awaken our divinity. Now, awakening divinity means we have to cultivate our spirit. And cultivating spirit is energy, spirit is matter. And all energy matter must be cultivated through exercise. You get stronger through exercise. Nothing gets stronger without exercise. Energy doesn't get stronger unless you put more resistance to it. Nothing gets stronger without resistance. So if I want to awaken my divinity, I'm going to be challenged in different situations to be exercise my spiritual muscle. So my spiritual muscle is put in place to go against the exercise, against the challenges, the opportunities, the expressions, the situations I come in contact with. So if something happens or I have a catastrophic situation in my life, I need to go to God to find out what's the nature of this situation. Ultimately, it's there to help strengthen me, make me stronger. They say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But I need to understand why, how, why me, why this situation. And that's what oracles God can give us. Only God can give us that information. I can sit back and ponder, well, this happened, therefore I need to do this or whatever. But I mean, again, I'm just guessing. I put 3 chambers in the bullet in the gun. I spin the chamber. I'm pulling the bullet, pulling the trigger. I'm gonna hit sometimes. I'm gonna miss sometimes. The only way to know 100% of the time what's the right thing to do is to get guidance from God. Only God knows. It's Jinyami. So when I want to know, I have to go to God. So it's not about the system. A lot of spiritual systems have good teachings, good practices, good principles, but they also have to have a means of evaluating, making decisions, helping us understand the circumstances and situations that come into our life. Now, if that person was practicing a regular decision, a system, I should say, and they had this great challenge and they say, oh God, why me? Well, the oracle, to, to consult with God through the oracle system, they can understand why. Jesus was tested. He didn't say, why me? He said, well, he did say, why me? Why are you forsaking me?
He said it a few different times.
He did say,
He's like, I was about to, I
yeah,
was rolling.
yeah, you're right.
Like, take this.
The exercise, he said, he was able to understand God communicating. The clarity became clear to him. Why him?
Yeah.
He was to learn through the experience. And ultimately, he said, get behind me, Satan. What does that mean? It means get behind me all of the human expression, human feelings, human sins, human ideas. Get behind me and follow. Follow what? Follow the divinity within me, the Christ within me.
All right, thank you. I just want to ask one more thing, and I'm not sure, I came on a little late, so I'm not sure if you already covered this, but I've heard there being discussion and debate about our ancestry. Like, for instance, if you are an African American, there are many African Americans right now who are, not just right now, but through these last decades, who have been searching for that. They understand, and on some level, that they come from greatness, but they're not really. They've been seeking what that looked like, and proof of that, and in their search for that, um, they've gone to the motherland, or they've also looked into different ancient civilizations, like the ancient Kemetic or Egyptian civilization, where there's lots of evidence that shows that people that look like them were the creators or of that civilization. And so, but now in that discussion, there have been people that have come out to say the opposite, like, well, no, if you do your DNA and you came from West Africa, how could you be connected to ancient Egypt or Kemet, as people also know it, the place to be. Where is the evidence that shows that there's a correlation between the Africans that were in West Africa and their cultural understanding and way of accessing divinity. How is there a correlation or a connection? How can that be demonstrated, that there might be a connection between those people and the people that came from out of Kemet? And you might have already spoken to this.
Well, we did believe, but we didn't, in terms of the connection piece. If you study the histories of many of the people in West Africa, they will all tell you that their ancestors migrated from Northeast Africa. What today we call Sudan, ancient Egyptian part of Africa. And as they migrated, they took with them different systems, different practices, different techniques. That's one way. And as a matter of fact, in the Divine Kingship of Asante, the book that we're talking about, there's some of that genealogy there. Secondly, in terms of genetics, it can be traced, every human being on earth can be traced back to Africa. And that the birthplace in Africa, the so-called, which would be the Garden of Eden, theoretically speaking, would be in that same area of Africa, northeastern part of Africa, along the Nile corridor, Nile Valley. So you can find it in the spiritual practices and the spiritual ideals. You find it in the historical practices of many traditions. In Mali, of the Dogon, Yoruba, of the Yoruba people, in Nigeria, at the Akans, and the Guans, and many people in Ghana. And you can find through the historical, if you study clearly and practically enough, the Bantu in South Africa. They all have the same common principles, that man is the divine being, that man and God are in essence one and the same. That man is a vehicle that is separated from all other creation by his link to the divinity. It's all there. But what ancient Kemet gives us is the philosophical framework, spiritual framework that we can use to guide us back to this evolution, to guide us back to this understanding. And that's in the 11 laws of God. And the 11 laws of God, so-called 11 laws of Ma'at, are these laws that identify the different functional faculties of our spirit and how we can identify where we are spiritually speaking in terms of our evolution based on the aspects of the spirit that's being nurtured and manifesting itself through my experiences in life. So if the highest law is Amen, obviously, and the law of Amen says that peace is my essential nature. And you mentioned earlier about how the brain, people get upset in the brain, cortisol, etc., all that stuff. Well, that shows that those things cannot be natural to us because those things are harmful to us. Nothing that's harmful to us can be natural to us. And peace is the only functional part of the spirit, which is natural to us, is the baseline of the spirit that's natural to us. And as long as I'm tapping back into that peace, I'm awakening and cultivating my spirit and allowing it to develop and grow. So it's understanding that everything evolves from that peace into all the other manifestations of the spirit. So the 11 laws of God, which our ancestors identified and put into their context, gives us a map that we can follow to help guide us toward the awakening of our divinity, such that we'll know that the decisions I'm making are based on, am I truly making a decision, or am I just being followed? I'm just following the animal influences. You made a decision about, you never can choose the wrong thing. Choice, the only proper choice you can make is do the right thing. Everything else is given into the energy. So if someone comes up and smacks me, for example, and my spirit, my energy in my spirit says smack them back, that's not a choice. I'm giving into the animal parts of my being. I'm giving into the mammalian part of my being. I'm giving into the reptilian part of my being, which says strike back. Whereas the higher part of the spirit might say turn the other cheek. But how am I going to know what to do? How am I going to know which discourse to follow, unless I can tap into the truth faculty, the wisdom faculty, the divine faculty within me. And the only way I can do that is by tapping in through God, to God, through the divination systems. Otherwise, I'm just reacting, responding out my emotions, out my senses, which is not choices that are being made, just giving into the satanic influences. So Satan now is guiding me as opposed to behind me.
I have a question on that one though. In that moment, it would be hard to consult the oracle. So there would have to be a level of cultivation in order to know the right decision in the moment.
Yeah. So yeah, that's through your spiritual work.
Okay.
Because
like
ultimately consultation, again, God communicates with man through this faculty here. So if I awaken this faculty within my being, then God no longer need to consult. I become an oracle. God can communicate through me, to me through my wisdom faculty, and I know what inherently is right to do. And that's where we want to get to. But until that point, I need something. I need a crutch to help walk me to the divine understanding.
That makes sense. Okay. Because it's not like he's gonna smack you. You got time to go get the oracle and decide what
Well, if you watch movies, you do have some time.
Sorry.
Please freeze the frame. Go do the reading, come back, and
like yeah. All right. Is there any other questions?
Well, I mean, and just to piggyback off of what you just said, I mean, the same thing would apply. I mean, if somebody is about to hurt you, if they're grabbing you, attacking you, I mean, you're at the animal instinctive things are put in us to help us survive another day to do a reading. Like, I mean, it's obvious if someone's trying to attack you, you need to get away from them. You need to save yourself at all costs. Is that, wouldn't you agree? In those situations?
But that's Jesus.
Say that again?
You have to ask Jesus.
What did you say?
You have to ask
I'm sorry.
Jesus.
I need to ask Jesus?
Yes. Could he not have saved himself?
Well, I thought that was a
Metaphor?
I mean, are you saying that? Yeah, I mean, are you saying that if someone attacks us, that we should just allow them to attack us and kidnap us?
11 laws on the tree. 11 laws. And these laws are interrelated and interconnected. The law of Amen says, peace is my nature. The law of Al-Ser says, everything is one. The law of Tuti says, I must be able to resolve all conflict. The law of Seker says that I have the power, that everything is a part of my destiny. The law of Ma'at says everything is interdependent and related. The law of Herakuti says the rights of each individual has to be preserved. So, once I've awakened my spirit until I can awaken my spirit to know which law is intuitively proper, I must apply the laws as I understand them. So, if someone is violating my space, and I must exert the law of Herahudi, which says I have the right to exist. My understanding is that I'm making this exercise is not based out of fear. It's not based out of emotionalism. It's not based out of the animal. It's based out of the divine understanding that I have a right to exist, and that this person and I are really one. And I have to figure out, how do I resolve the conflict that we're having? Whereas a snake is just going to kill you, bite you to kill you. It's not going to try to resolve an issue it has with you. A lion is not going to try to resolve an issue it has with you. A lion is not going to try to resolve an issue it has with you. The divine person will subdue you with the understanding that we have to resolve this because we're really just one. Different mindset, it's different mode of functioning, it's different goal.
Right. I totally understand and get all of that. And so, with that being said, if someone, so I need to basically subdue them or just escape from them and then hope that one day we can revisit this and I can try, then I can try to reach the divinity of the inside of that person.
If possible, what if you can't?
I can try to reason with them while it's happening.
But what if you can't?
I need to figure out how I can get away if I can't get away from them and there's nothing else I can do, all I can do is, what people say is work on myself and pray and visualize. If they're not being receptive to what I'm saying, I can still try to talk. If they take my tongue out, I can visualize, them making the right choice. And that's all. I can only be at peace with what's happening.
The only thing you have at your disposal, the only true thing you have at your disposal is the ultimate goal. It's peace. Amen. Peace we always have at our disposal. We can't control all situations in life. We can't control other people's behavior. We can always control how we respond to that behavior. The main thing we can always control is if I'm at peace with the situation, I'm always going to be successful. Because life is here just as an opportunity for me to cultivate my peace. Life is not an eternal proposition. We don't know how we're going to go. We may go through some quote unquote unforeseen or unforsaken situation, unfortunate situation. A baby, an infant child, is riding down the street in the car with his mother in the back seat, and some fools are shooting at one another across the street, and they kill the child. The child has nothing to do with that. The child has no response to that. The mother has no response to that, except to be at peace in the situation. Yeah, it was horrendous. It was unfortunate, but they couldn't avert the calamity. But so-called calamities are part of life. The one thing we can always control is our response. And the primary response that we always have control over is the peace of our nature. Because we're divine beings, because peace is our essential nature. And as long as we don't lose the peace, we don't lose anything. Because we're eternal beings, which means that this life is here for a specific time period, and we're going to come back and continue the evolution toward our divinity the next life, if we keep our peace and our wits about us. If I'm constantly evolved into emotionally responding to things, when I die the second death, which means I come back to the earth and I'm not aware of where I was. But if I can keep my peace, when I come back to when I'm reincarnated back in the earth, I come back with an understanding that it's another phase of my evolution toward my divinity. And I can pick it right where I am today. Evolution is just like school. If I learn the lessons of third grade, I die the third grade, I'm reborn next year in the fourth grade. If I don't learn those lessons, I come back, I have to repeat the third grade again. No evolution, no growth, no process. Now, I could fail because I had an illness, I could fail because of whatever. Anything could happen. I could pass because the teacher liked me. The important thing is that I understand that this is a time period and my response to the situation is always got to be peace. As long as I'm responding out of the highest part of my spirit, which is peace, I can understand the unity of the experience. I can realize that I can resolve the conflict of the situation. I can understand This was a part of my destiny. I can understand that everything is interdependent. I can understand that my situation is over. But I can't do any of that if I'm constantly fighting with this understanding that as a human being, I think that I'm immortal. I think I'm gonna live forever. No, no one's gonna live forever. Most important thing is what am I learning while I'm living? And if I'm learning to cultivate my peace while I'm living, if I have to give it up to death, I've lost nothing.
And so, how does justice play into the acclamation of peace? I'm just thinking in general, in reference to what's happened now, what happened with George Floyd. He may have not been in the place of peace when he was when he couldn't breathe, or he may have. I mean, right before he passed. But the onslaught of what happened following. How does this? How? I mean, what are if everyone had maintained their peace? Well, first of all, clearly he wouldn't have been taken off the planet in that way, but there has to be on this level. Would you say that the universe or God or the collective divinity worked to bring about a change in this regard? Or
Well, everything is a part of the system. Everything is interdependent. The real question, the real chance should not be no justice, no peace. The real chance should be no peace, no justice. Because ultimately, until we cultivate peace, we cannot have justice. Justice means fairness. Fairness means I understand that everything is interdependent and interrelated. Fairness is understanding my art. My art is understanding that everything is destined. It all links back to men, all links back to peace. And until we cultivate the understanding that peace is our essential nature, we can never have true justice because there will never be fairness because mankind, human beings are not capable of exercising fairness. So what happens is situations, circumstances like the unfortunate or fortunate, depending on how you look at uh, a situation with Mr. Floyd, calls into mind the concept of spiritual awakening, the need for a spiritual awakening, the need for a higher call to consciousness, the need for something to change. It has to be a change in the modus operandi. But change to what? That's the question that has to be answered. Because if you resolve everything, all the challenges around policing, does that truly make us better off as a people? The answer will be ultimately no. Because you have to change the mindset that the people carry into decisions that they're making to make true change. We have to establish that there can be no justice if there's no peace. And peace is what I have to bring to the world. Peace is what I have to cultivate within my own spirit. And I have to be guided toward awakening peace. And once we all cultivate this peace within us, then we can truly have justice because we'll understand that situations like what happened to Mr. Floyd are not a part of a peaceful resolution to situations in life.
Let's talk about the
So until human beings begin to move and understand that we're not just we're not the intellectual faculty, we're not this being, but there's something more to us. And until we tap into that something more to us, until we can tap into the understanding of what our ancestors meant when they said Osir, until we can awaken that Osir within us, we're going to constantly have these challenging situations in life, in our societies, that are going to constantly spur us to understand that there has to be something else to what we need to do in our lives. The same thing in the body. The body has its homeostasis, but when homeostasis is disrupted in the body, through illness, quote unquote, something has to happen to channel that illness, change that illness, the illness state of the body back to peace, back to the state of balance, back to the state of wealth and health. So that's where we are today. So the situation around Mr. Floyd, all the other situations that are constantly coming out, are showing to the body that there's illness in the body. So what we got to do to solve the illness? What we do to heal the illness? Well, the scientists will say that the true solution to most illness, the root of most illnesses in the body, is stress. Stress. Stress is the opposite of peace. So if I can cultivate peace, I'm going a long ways toward awakening the healing faculties within the body to make the transformation that we need to make. So until we all begin to understand that peace is our nature, and begin to understand how do we awaken that peace within us, how do we cultivate that peace, that's what's going to bring the challenge and transformation of the illness that society is experiencing through Mr. Floyd's experience and other experiences. We got to start with peace. And understand that peace is the solution to justice. Peace is the foundation of all experience in the world. The first manifestation that God put in the world was peace. And then came everything else. So we want to restore peace, we want to restore righteousness, restore our divinity. We want to become the images of that we look in the mirror, understand that we are divine beings. We have to understand that peace is the key to turn that channel, turn that key to unlocking those doors, to making the world the better place that we want it to be.
So should people show people how to attain that peace and during this time of unrest or cleansing that the body is going through? Or should we allow it to happen just naturally and allow those brothers and sisters that feel the call to find a way to make it to a level to understand peace? Because I, a few days ago, I was out there meditating in the plaza, just as a symbol of how I think I can participate in this change that we're taking or making. Or should we just allow things to happen as they are?
What are they? What are they? Depending on where you are, there's a lot of stuff happening.
Well, for
you
us,
have to be what you want to happen. You have to be what you want to happen. You have to become what we want change to be. What we want change to be, we have to become that. And until we can understand what we need to become, if we're not looking to become that divine image that's behind me, change is going to become what we see it to be. If we see it being people on the street, that's the change. But ultimately, that's going to transform into something else. What's the end goal? What's the end game? What do we finally want the world to be? We finally want the world to be, I believe we want the world to be, I know what I want the world to be, a place where everything is working in unison, where there's constant unity. Unity is not everything being the same. Everything understanding its role within the grand ethos of the world, where we understand that nature is a part of our being. We understand that each person is a part of our being. We understand that I am my brother's keeper, where we understand that all the great platitudes and spiritual lessons that have been taught in the past are that not just lessons and ideals, but they're actually practices that we put in place. That's the kind of world we want. And until we get there, we're not going to get there if we don't see it and begin to be it. So we have to be the change we want to be. Yeah, there's going to be hiccups along the way. The body, to get well, the body's going to have to cause some eruption.
Yeah.
That's going to happen. You get sickness in the body's going to try to drive it out. You're going to have big boils on your skin. You're going to have tumors growing in the body. You're going to have all kinds of things in the body. The question is, what do I need to do to reestablish homeostasis of the body? And ultimately, it's about peace and providing proper nourishment to the body. And that nourishment is the energy that I'm fueling my spirit with. Is my spiritual energy being fueled by that of awakening the divinity within me? Or is my spiritual energy being fueled by becoming a human being or being a human being or whatever? That's what's going to guide us. That's what's going to transform us. Everything's about energy. Where's the energy going? What's the energy being directed towards? What do I want the world to be? What am I going to put my energy into being? That's the solution. There's not much else we can do other than be what we want the world to be.
Be the change.
That's right. We are the ones we've been waiting on. We need to understand what that one looks like. Now we just need to know what that one looks like. And the image that our answers gives the image behind me. It'll see.
All right. Is there any other questions? I think she actually might be gone. All right.
No, that was great. Thank you so much. That was great. I wonder if you will be having a part 2 to this interview, because there's some friends that I know would have wanted to ask questions, and so
it's recorded, right? It's recorded, right?
This is recorded, yeah.
So you can
but to ask the questions, I don't know.
Well, not necessarily an interview questions. We can set up some kind of vehicle through which, but you know, they can communicate with you, get questions, and we can figure out the answer. For instance,
it sounds like it's a possibility to set another conversation up.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Right. Dr. and Comet, peace. Thank you for this energy. Thank you for your time. I am honored and blessed that you were able to spend this time and this wisdom with us today. Thank you very much, Twyla.
Okay, heads up. Thank you for the opportunity.